Hello and welcome to the third episode of Payara Podcast. My name is Dominika Tasarz-Wachacka and I will be your host for this episode. Today I would like to invite you to listen to the conversation I had with Ken Fogel. Ken is a well-known expert in Java and Jakarta EE industry. He's been working with Java for over 20 years. He has been a computer science instructor for over 30 years. Unsurprisingly, he is also a Java champion and a Java Community Process Executive Committee member. He has been the department chairperson and program coordinator of the Computer Science Technology program at Dawson College in Canada for 25 years. He is an active conference organizer, very prominent and active in the Java, Java EE and Jakarta EE community, so there's no wonder why I had to invite him to our podcast. In this episode, we mainly talk about his book, Transitioning to Java, that he published not long ago. We talked about where the idea for the book came from, who the book is aimed at, and a little spoiler here, it's not just for junior devs, but also anyone who wants to start their adventure with Java. We talked about Ken's research process and general approach to not only writing the book, but also sharing his knowledge and experience with others, especially in the context of formal college and university education around computer science and how modern Java skills fit into that. I also have some good news for those who would like to purchase Ken's Transitioning to Java book published by Pact Publishing. It is currently on offer as we publish this episode in late November 2023. There's a 20% discount for printed version of the book and a 30% discount for an ebook version when purchased before the end of 2023. No code required. So if you're interested, head over to pactpub.com, which will be linked in the description of this episode, and get yourself a copy of Ken Fogel's Transitioning to Java book. And for those of you who haven't tried Payara platform yet, we have free trials available for all of our runtimes on our website payara.fish. We also have 15 days free trial for Payara Cloud available, so make sure you give it a go while the free trial is still available, as it's on for limited time only. Okay, so let's listen to this episode of Payara Podcast, Transitioning to Java with Ken Fogel. Great. Hi, Ken. It's great to have you on the Payara podcast. I think the last time I saw you in person, have it been? I think it's been in San Francisco Java One conference, maybe in like 2017 or 18. Do you remember?
I couldn't tell you what year, but I had the good fortune of being invited, I think back in 2013, 2014 to my first Java One, and then had the opportunity to go every year after that. So somewhere along the line, we've definitely met.
Yeah, that's true. I was trying to pinpoint the year, but yeah, I've been 3 or 4 times, and I just remember it was one of the last ones held in San Francisco, and I really missed those. But yeah, that's when we first met. So I remember that. I just don't remember the year. But yeah, and obviously that's all gone now. So no more Java One in San Francisco, but lots of great memories from there. But yeah, thank you for coming to our podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you about a couple of different things today, but especially about your book. So for those of our listeners who may not know you yet, I included a bit of a bio intro at the beginning of this podcast, and I feel like we could probably talk about like 10 different topics with you, considering your wide experience in the Java industry, working with the community, organizing events, speaking at conferences, educating people, and there's so much more. But for this episode, I really wanted to focus on specifically on your most recent achievement, which is publishing a Transitioning to Java book, which I think is very relevant to our listeners. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
How long has it been now since the book came out?
Well, the book came out in April, and I started working on it the year before. So, April 22 to its publishing in April 23.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, 12 months.
Well, of course, they expected it in 6 months, but it also was going to be 10 chapters and then became 16. It was going to be 200 pages, and then it became 350. But every page was needed.
That's it. And I don't think I've ever heard from anyone who wrote a book that it ever took the time that it was initially estimated. It's always more than that.
Well, what I find amazing is when I talk to people I know have written books, and I'm kind of embarrassed that it took me a year, and the most common response I get is only a year.
Exactly. No, that was my thought. 12 months. It's not. It doesn't seem like that long, especially considering the length of the book and the topic of the book as well. And people just work on different topics, different books for years until they even go to the publisher, and then they spend another couple of months actually writing it. So no, I think it's quite impressive. 12 months. And I really liked your LinkedIn series going through each chapter. That's how I've learned a lot about
Oh,
actually what's happening in the book, and that was a really good thing. And I would go on LinkedIn every day and see each chapter's overview. I really like that step by step. I think it was like very useful for people and your followers to understand what's in the book, and
mhm.
is it going to be useful for me, or which chapters will be especially useful for me. So that was a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, no, it was interesting. You're trying to figure out how to market your book. And I said, well, why don't I just put cut out that table of contents and let people see what's in there. And well, that was fun.
Yeah, no, I think that really helped. It definitely helped me to understand what's in it, and yeah, for potential readers as well, because there are probably things in there that some people might already be aware of, but then so where do I go, and which
Mhm.
chapters will be most interesting for me? So I think every author could work something like that out, especially for the books that talk about technical things and things that you can follow step by step to do whatever you need to do and whatever the book is about. So like, where did the idea come from for writing the book? Because I think it's your first book, is it?
Well, that's right. So, I'm a retired computer science instructor. I spent 31 years at Dawson College, was chairman of the department, and I had a lot of fun. But I'm one of those people, I guess every developer, you plan, you plan, you plan. So believe it or not, 30 years ago, I knew when I was going to retire. And when that time came, pandemic or not, I retired. And then, of course, as an academic, what do? Well, we all dream of writing a book. So I had made contact with both O'Reilly and A-Press at Java 1 conferences. So I went, ooh, I know people. So I reach out, and I remember reaching out to O'Reilly first, and I said, I've got this great idea for a beginner's book. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, a kind of anti-hello world, and I think this will be great. And the person I knew at O'Reilly was quite honest with me and said, we don't need another beginner's book. Okay, thank you very
Right.
much. So next up was the other publisher who contacted me, and that was A-Press. So same pitch to A-Press. I've got this really novel idea for a beginner's book, and I get exactly the same answer. We've already got too many of them. But then they turn around and say, but could you make a video for us? So if you go up on A-Press or O'Reilly, because they all sell each other's material or subscription, there is a video for absolute beginners to the Java language. So I did that for A-Press, but I still wanted to write a book.
Yeah, it's not the
So
same, is it? Video.
exactly. So at that time, Pact reaches out to me. So I go, ooh, let me try and sell this again. So I say, okay, how about a book on, novel approach to beginners? And gee, they're all consistent. I got the same answer. We got enough of those. So then I was thinking, and they said, pitch us something else. Interestingly, the other two publishers didn't, but Pact did. So I thought about it for a couple of days, and I said, what about working developers, people who are in the industry, junior, senior, doesn't matter, who suddenly find themselves responsible for some Java code, or deciding, gee, there's a company that they'd like to go and work for, but they're primarily a Java house. I'm a Python, Rust, Go, C#, whatever your background is, JavaScript, heck, even HTML. We'll avoid the discussion on whether it's a language or not for now. So I pitched this idea of a beginner's book for experts, a book that would focus on a range of topics that would allow someone who already understands coding, who doesn't need a whole chapter on what a variable is, or what a function is, or what a method is. And let's aim it towards them. So it's a beginner's book, but it can move much more quickly, faster. It doesn't have to, well, a variable, blah, 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 and all of that stuff. So they said, ooh, that sounds good. Give us an outline. And that's where I began with an outline that said 10 chapters, 200 pages. At one point, they sent me a copy of a Python book that was 800 pages and said to me, we'd like a book like this one.
Oh, wow, 800 pages.
So I wrote back and I said no. But they
No,
were
I don't
cool.
blame you.
Okay. They were willing to take the risk with me. But as we progressed, as I, did my best to follow the schedule, I started to realize all the things that I had neglected in the original outline. The small things, big things, a whole range of little topics. And so the book very quickly grew from the original 10 chapters to 16 chapters. But in each and every chapter, I hope it's written for somebody who knows how to code, right? We're assuming you're a professional, but you want to know how it's done in Java. And that was what I thought was, an exciting approach. I've never really seen any books that talk about moving from language to language. Not to say that there aren't any, just that I wasn't smart enough to find them. Most beginners' books assume you've probably never seen a computer. Chapter 1 is finding the on-off switch. So we didn't need that. And that's how this book came about. And then transitioning to Java, well, I just thought that first word was so hot these days.
True, true.
And so far, only one person has pointed out that they figured out the double meaning, but that's okay.
No, I think that's a really, I didn't expect that answer, to be fair. And obviously yeah, there's different ways to deal with publishers, like you said, and yeah, they definitely they can be very harsh if something's not on the list of interest. But yeah, it's good that Pact decided to sort of dig a bit deeper, and this idea came about. So was it so this original idea that you had for the beginner's book, so and what you actually ended up writing in the end, would you say it was quite a big diversion from your original idea?
Oh, definitely. The book that came out covers a wider range of topics. There's chapters on Maven, chapters on Docker, chapters on JavaFX, chapter on JSF, right? This is your fast course in Java programming and some of the things you will likely need to know in the workplace.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I think because I wanted to ask you like who would be your perfect reader for that book? So you partially I think already answered it, but yeah, something that I didn't expect. So yeah, it is for definitely people that already know what they're doing, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing with Java, right?
That's right. And then there's a secondary audience, and that is, developers who, are working in Java. I recently visited with the chairperson of the computer science program at a university here in Montreal, and he admitted quite proudly that they were using Java 8 and they saw no reason to go any further. And
Interesting.
so there are a lot of companies. I was surprised that the school would. I know at my school, Dawson College, our feeling was we had to make sure that our students were at the state of the art at the moment they graduated. We would upgrade our version of Java every year so that when they graduated, whatever year, that was Java 17, then our students knew Java 17. But our program was different from a university approach, and so they stuck with 8. So imagine now you work for a company, you've done 8, and one day somebody comes in and says, oh, well, I guess we better go to 17 or whatever else. And gee, I heard we should all be using Docker or whatever. And so, that becomes the second market. Developers who have kind of, just been using an older version of Java for years and years. And so this is an opportunity, and this book stops at 17. introduces them to a whole range of concepts that are easy to do, easy to adopt, that have really advanced the language. So that becomes the second market. So you have people who know another language and people who know Java but haven't upgraded their Java skills in many years.
Yeah, that makes sense, and especially that, as you said, there's plenty of those in the market, and it does depend on where you work for, and if you've been in one company for a while,
Mhm.
and only used the older version, then why would you consider upgrading until you have to? And then, yeah, and like you said, going from very old version to the recent version, it can be quite a big of a shock to the system. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
there's a lot of Payara users that deal with the same problem, because our releases also follow the most recent Java releases, and you have to upgrade if you want to go to the latest release. So you have to upgrade your Java, and if you're not, then you're in trouble. So yeah, people do have to follow, but it's usually, unfortunately, they realize until it's like very last call, and there isn't much time. So hopefully your book will help with that, and help with upgrading the knowledge as well as the software, as the operating system as well. So how did you decide what would go in the book? Are there some chapters that didn't make it into the final version? You did say that there were 6 extra chapters that made it in. Was there more?
At this point, no, I think I covered everything that I wanted to. Again, I was concerned about, books where, this is going to be a little insulting, where you can't help but feel that the publisher or the authors are being paid by the pound.
Yeah, no, I know.
And I have met some of these authors, and they're really nice people, but I mean, trying to use their books in the classroom was always a problem, right? You'd have a book with 26 chapters and you're trying to use it in a 13 to 15 week course. So I spent time trying to think of what was important. There was my 10 original topics. And then as I wrote them, I started to recognize, there's a little more detail here. There's a little more information that an experienced programmer would want to know. And so that's how it grew. As I turn my head, I'm looking at my table of contents here. Um, I was really happy with, what I managed to include. A book that says use records and, forget all that bean stuff if you can. Collections, threads. It is everything in the kitchen sink. Now, obviously, if you really want to delve deeply into any of these topics, there are a range of excellent books. Certainly, of late, there's been a lot of books written on concurrency. Design patterns are important, and yeah, there is a chapter talking about design patterns. But just to introduce a developer who's probably familiar with them in their environment, recognizing that, of course, they exist in Java and any other language for that matter. So no, I think I've covered as much as I would want to cover in a book like this. And hopefully people will read it either because they're interested or they have sleep problems and they need something to put them out quickly.
Well, hopefully that second one will be less popular. Yeah, motive and reasoning for reading it. But yeah, I think because it's sort of introductory book, in that sense, it will hopefully let the readers realize, okay, if they need to read up more about a certain topic, it's mentioned in there, so they at least will know what they didn't know before, and then follow with some extra studies, whether that's another book or videos, or however they prefer to learn. But I think this is a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at it, my last chapter is all about the creating your own custom JRE. Let's work with Docker. And these are skills somebody who was going into a Java shop is going to need to know.
That's right. Yeah, that sounds good. So hopefully, yeah, it will set the readers up for the further journey with Java. It's just the first few steps, or 16 steps
That's it.
maybe.
Exactly.
So your book talks about both theoretical concepts and practical applications. How do you approach this balance, especially within the book? Is it more important to talk about one or the other in the context of transitioning to Java, and also, in the context of this being a written,
Yeah.
piece?
Again, because of my background coming from a program that focused on the practical rather than the theoretical, our responsibility at Dawson College was to turn out job-ready developers at the end of a 3-year program so that they can go into a company and be ready to code. So we've always been very practical oriented, how to do things. Especially in this type of book where we're dealing with people who already know how to code, there's not a lot of theory. Most of my time writing this book was actually writing the sample code, because I wanted to be certain that what I was explaining would be obvious in the code. And there's code for every single chapter, showing the concepts. The readers can run it, adjust it, change it. So it was the minimum amount of theory that someone needed, and then swiftly moving on to the practical. How does this work in Java? How do you make this happen? Whether it's unit testing or big decimal, or, server side, the whole range of them. So yes, a little theory, but I think there's a lot more practical in the book.
Yeah, and I think what you said before about the audience and the ideal reader of your book, they would already, have the hands dirty with the code already, and then it would be something that they would be doing probably on day to day in their jobs. So they would be probably eager to code right away.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's why we all do this. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy coding, and now I get to even write about my coding, so that's even better. Or when I was in the classroom, and we had at the college setting, classes are never more than about 30 or 35 students. I don't face, as in universities, a lecture hall with 300 disinterested students. So, they wanted to know how to get it done. And so that's what I would focus about. Though I have to admit, I do miss a blackboard. I was one of those evil professors who would cover a blackboard. Uh,
No, but I think again, because you said with your teaching background and just getting the students ready to go and actually work, this is crucial, and this is also something that the readers of the book hopefully will be able to do, because from my perspective as a person maybe at some point involved in like recruitment and trying to get the right people for the team, for the dev, for the engineering team, it's very tough to find someone right out of the university or college who actually knows how to code in practice. And we did work with a couple of local universities, and the curriculum doesn't really cover anything that is current, unfortunately, at least with those universities that we worked with, which is a shame, because we would love to have more younger people, graduates, and let them just start right away. But they really have to learn on the job most of the time, unfortunately.
it was my discovery, and I don't know if I should say this, but I'm still so angry about this. I'm going to say this. In talking to this university chairperson, he admitted that, and Java is the primary language at this university, that unit testing is only covered in a single course at the master's level, only in the software engineering option, that no one else in the program, right up to a PhD, would ever see unit testing. And
Mm.
I just, my jaw dropped at that complete lack of interest in the workplace and the requirements of the workplace. As a teacher, we introduced unit testing in the second year of our 3-year program. And in my course, and I did the project courses, a desktop and then a web, the students were told clearly, everything has to be submitted with unit tests, and I won't look at your code until I deem your test sufficient. And that created this idea that, I have to be able to prove that my code works,
Mm.
and that's talked about in the book. But here was this university where they went, nah, that's not important. Yeek.
Yeah, I think it's the is that gap of what's happening at the university in the university setting, and obviously unfortunately, most of the people that teach don't necessarily have the current experience in what's happening in the real world where people actually work on this and build applications, build the code, write the code, and what
Mhm.
it actually means to apply it to products and in companies and corporations. So yeah, we've seen that as well, and majority of our graduates, yeah, we have to teach them. So it would be great to have more people, whether that's young graduate right out of university, of someone who is transitioning to Java from another language, or just changing their career. There's different routes to get there, but someone who actually people have this opportunity to know what to expect when they actually come into workplace, and not just have this theoretical knowledge of outdated technology, but actually have this practical knowledge and know how to apply it, and start pretty much from day one.
So there we go. I think we have a new market for my book. Everybody who has a computer science degree, who gets their first job, is required to read my book, because in over the years, what we've always known is a university graduate takes between 3 and 6 months before they can become productive, whereas a college graduate is productive on the first day.
Yeah,
Now, there are things that a university graduate has that ours don't. No question about that, right? We focus on the practical rather than the theoretical. So our graduates are going to, depend on architects and designers to give them direction in what they should do. Universities seem to be more interested in that aspect of it, and it's needed. But it is kind of strange that there's so little emphasis on practical and I can't say all universities, let's just say too many universities.
yeah, it definitely isn't everywhere, and it probably it's different in different countries as well. But
Mhm.
I'm talking from the UK experience, and unfortunately, it matches yours in Canada. So yeah, well, maybe it's the expectations as well. Maybe we should not expect that from university graduates, and give them a bit more time and give them a bit more training. And yeah, I don't know. It's another topic probably to discuss, but I think your book can definitely help in that. And I think we should be putting it on the shelves if we do have graduates, and just handing it over for those new people that are joining, and do need some practical application of their skills, which they didn't gain, unfortunately, at the university. Um, so, what was your research process then, for gathering the content of the book? Did you draw from your personal experience, documentation, combination of sources?
Well, certainly experience drives everything, right? Whether, there was my time in the classroom, though, there are a number of topics in the book that we just didn't have time to cover, even in a 3-year program. So, a lot of the research came from, what are people talking about? So yes, I have a big presence on Twitter. Um, whatever people may think of it, it still is where many Java developers are. LinkedIn, and then it goes on and on. I think the other day I got on a new one called Blue Sky. So, it's like the social network of the week. Um, but what do people talk about? What do they think is important? And then what do people not talk about? And, why did I think it was important? So it was from that I said, okay, what is critical? Um, I took an approach that said, IDEs are nice. I talk about them in a chapter, show pictures of each of the major ones. That's cool. But there's nothing in the book that needs an IDE. Even when we get to server side, oh, here we go. Use the deploy, open up the admin, do everything from Maven. I thought it was important that a developer can work without an IDE, because sometimes we just rely too much on the IDE. And, how do you deal with that? So I wanted to keep it simple there. And again, focusing on what are the skill sets, what are the modern approaches. As I first came across object-oriented programming, so we're looking at the late 1980s, and then comparing it to what object-oriented programming or how it's used today, they're two different animals, right? The original principles of object-oriented programming somehow or other fell through a trap door and they're gone, right? Now it's all about action and data, data access objects, action classes. That's really changed the landscape, though a lot of books still continue to look at object-oriented programming and use the expression, you're developing data types, right? My favorite example is, think of an integer. Well, an integer has operations, so you should be creating objects like that. And certainly that's how I taught it. That's how I used it through the 80s into the 90s. But the industry changed. And so suddenly there was a separation between data and action, whereas the original principle implied that they should be in the same unit. And so these are the kind of things that, I thought was important that I express in the book and, led to my choice of chapters.
Mm. Yeah, and that leads me nicely to my next question. So, how did you ensure that the content remains relevant and up to date? Because obviously, we live in the world that is changing a lot, and then this industry is changing as fast, if not faster. And you've mentioned that already with all of the versions of Java. How is this book? Do you think is it going to be as relevant in 2 years' time as it is today?
Yes, I would think so. For the longest time, advances in the language, new versions have really focused on what I would call the senior developer, the very complex problems out there. And we talk about them. We certainly talk about streaming and so on in here, but things are changing at the other end as well. And I feel my book will hold up because a lot of the high-end features really are something a developer will reach when they need it. So I'm kind of in the middle ground, but I'm also excited at what's happening at the beginning phase. The nameless classes are exciting. Something I just learned a couple of weeks ago while I was upgrading a slide deck for Java and Education that I am part of in the Java community process. And that was the fact that we now have 4 different signatures for main. And we can use them all. Though my favorite remains void main. Forget all that public static, right? If it has to be, why do I have to write it? And so I'm really excited about that. I really think that Java is, a lot of work of the architects and the team is focusing on how to make Java easier to run. I have an example of a simple program that calculates, I think it's compound interest or loan payments. And when you look at the, say, Python version, and you look at the new Java version, well, with nameless classes, there's only a 2-line difference between the Python and the Java, and there's no public static. I would teach beginners courses to young adults, and I was really strident. It was object oriented on day one, right? So you had a class, you had public static main, but I wouldn't let the students do anything in main. No system.out.println hello world. No, you instantiated the object and you called a method in it. So I was doing objects on day one, but it also meant I had to do things like, oh, public, forget that. Static, oh, who cares? Word class, we'll worry about that next week. And there was all this stuff I had to blow off just to get them started. Well, I've become less strident. The nameless class allows you to focus on the syntax of the language, allows you to focus on the structure of a solution. And the bottom line is structured programming is still the king. And then when they're ready, now we can move on and add all that decoration, talk about access control, how we encapsulate information in classes. And so I'm really excited about that. My book, though, sits in the middle in terms of what it's presenting. And for that reason, I think it'll have a longer shelf life. I was thinking about if I went to Java 21, what might I want to do? Well, there's, again, the nameless classes. I'm also interested in the new foreign language API, the simplification going from, I think it's JNI, which I understand nobody ever figured out how to use. And suddenly this new API, and I went to a workshop on it where you could actually run C code inside of a Java application and get the output from it. That probably be something I would want to add in a later version. And that excites me because of machine learning, right? So much of the libraries out there are written in C. Well, that's why Python, an excellent language, don't get me wrong, but Python interfaces better with C because it is C effectively. So Java is recognizing that these are the needs and they're meeting it. And I don't know of another language that is as dynamic, the 6-month cadence. We all thought it was insane. Well, it turns out it was brilliant.
Yeah, I think the
And
dynamic is the perfect word here.
yeah,
But that just gives you a few more ideas for further books then.
yeah.
Nothing bad about that. So what final advice or insights would you offer to developers? Let's say they completed your book and they're now ready or in the process to fully transitioning to Java. What would be the next step for them?
Well, I think, it's what I've told my students over the years. Use the language, right? It's one thing to read a book, see my little examples and go, okay, I've memorized it, but until you actually apply it, right? And especially if you're, working, if you're a, say a C# developer and you see an opportunity in a Java shop, you really want to be able to come in and say, yes, I can answer your interview questions. I might even be able to do a little whiteboarding with you, but I can also show you what I've developed, right? These may be my personal projects, but this will show you what I'm capable of. And so that's what I think someone reading any book must take what they've learned and apply it as soon as possible before, as they say, it goes in one ear and it falls out the other.
Yeah, and especially if your audience are people who are already working with other
Mm-hmm.
languages and they're probably busy people already. So yeah, just applying it to practice right away, or even as you go along, I guess you can do that. As you said, there's a lot of practical applications throughout the book already.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm hoping people who read the book will be inspired, looking at, the features available and recognize that, Java remains as relevant as before. I have had one of my children, my son worked at a bank in quality assurance. And that's when I discovered that at least in Canada, every major bank has got Java in the back end. Granted, they're all using React and all the other things for their mobile apps and everything else, but it's all being run with, Java, on the servers or, however they're setting it up. And so Java remains a significant language, especially if you want a good career, well-paying career. You want to go to a lot of conferences, become a Java developer.
That's right, and you can even become a Java champion eventually as well. But yeah, I think it's and again, even if you already know other languages, it's just to help you evolve and develop. And I think most of the developers have that in them, that you don't want to just sit on what you know and just not go any further. I think that's quite natural for people in this business, in this industry, that you do want to learn constantly.
Exactly. And to me, I always describe my entire career as every morning I wake up, I would go to the school, and I would be confronted with a brand new set of problems. That I wasn't, turning the widget 90 degrees to the right on the assembly line, though that is quite rare these days. But, I wanted to be challenged every day. Being a programmer was one way. And then being a teacher was an even more interesting way. of, shaping how people approach software, and hopefully for the better. I'm not sure.
Well,
So
we'll
every
see
now and
about
then it's
that.
exciting to hear that a student of mine, I have one former student who's now a senior manager at Amazon in Seattle. And, they've generally have been quite successful.
Yeah, and that must be a great feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To see that, the skills the entire program, all of the faculty were involved in, made them what they are, and they're having the time of their lives.
great, great. No, that sounds great. So I hope that your book is reaching to the right type of people, and yeah, and we discovered a third type of audience as well, which is again, you can use that in promoting it a little bit more, and we are very much happy to help share the word, because it's very important for us as well that as many people as possible know Java, know how to use it and apply it in the day-to-day life, whether that's for their personal project or for the actual mission critical environments in big banks or wherever they're
Mhm.
working for. It's all very much relevant. So what would you say is next for you then? Any more projects, any more books in the making?
Well, I actually just finished one project for the Eclipse Foundation. They asked me to develop a workshop on the latest Jakarta REST 3.1 library.
Oh, we like that.
And so I did. And again, like everything else, I went, oh, gee, a workshop, take me a month. Well, 5 months later, it got finished. And it's funny, it was used in Germany at Eclipse Con. And of course, by the time people hear this, I will know the following statement. But next week, we're meeting to do a post-mortem. How did the workshop go? I'm hoping to have the opportunity to do it at DevNexus if it's selected. So web services have become fascinating to me only because of their simplification. I used to teach web services at a local university, mid 2010s, and I was still looking at SOAP and WSDL and XSLT, which I still think are really cool, but I'm in the minority. And everybody wants to do REST. And REST was just far more complicated than it needed to be back in the day in Java. And now, 6 lines of code and you have a embedded REST server. You need even less lines of code if you do it in Pyera or some other server. So that's exciting that, the overhead of REST has become so small as to make it available everywhere. And of course, MicroProfile sits on top of that and takes advantage of that. So that was my most recent project. I get requests from publishers. I guess when you write one book, suddenly everybody's going, okay, you're going to write the next book for us. Uh, and as people send me topics, say, could you write a book on this? And no, I'm still trying to think of what I want to write a book on, and that isn't quite what I think I'd like to do. Hopefully get to do a bit more traveling, go to a few more conferences. Last year I was in Singapore for a meeting, then in New York City just a month or two ago. I've always loved that.
Yeah,
And
and so glad that we back to that stage of the
yeah,
world now that we
exactly,
can travel,
exactly.
because we all had quite a long break from that.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's lots of conferences and industry events coming. So do you think your workshop that you did at the EclipseCon, could that be yeah, you mentioned DevNexus, did you, that you
That's right.
applied
And
with them?
I didn't do it in Germany.
Okay.
Remember, the idea was for other people to do it. So Eclipse felt quite rightly that the first time it's used should be by someone else.
Mm.
And so it was. And so we're going to meet shortly and review it. And hopefully we can do it again in Atlanta. Um, on the Java community process, the Java and education, I mentioned that earlier. There's a slide deck, which I'm kind of proud was actually used in Santiago, Chile last Saturday to talk about why, Java should, remain prominent in the education sector. So I've worked on that. And I just like to have fun.
Yeah, I think we need more people like you, Ken, honestly, because I do feel like a lot of people in this industry, a lot of engineers, developers, learn most of their skills from the moment they start working in the industry rather than before. And it would be so great to see more of that education being really applicable in the real world. And what you're doing is exactly that, enabling people, whether they're, like I said, whether they're young developers just out of university or someone who is learning as the older and just changing or expanding their knowledge. It's just, yeah, it would be nice to see um people being more ready to start from day one. So thanks for doing all of this, and for having this practical insight into academic world. We need that.
Thank you, thank you. Hopefully, people will, adopt some of what I've written, see the value of practical and theoretical instruction. And, like I said, programming is solving a new problem every day, getting challenged every day. And that's what's always excited me about it.
Thank you, Ken. It was great to have you. So yeah, good luck with your project. Good luck with your, if you will have any ideas for the book coming from you personally, let us know. It will be probably in a couple of months' time, if not years, but that's fine. That's how it works. But we are definitely excited about transitioning to Java, and we will be definitely sharing the word about it a little bit more on our side at Payara. So thank you. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you so much for having me.